One of the big reasons people quite often struggle with boundaries is because none of us wants to feel like a rigid, tightly wound, uptight, difficult, or selfish person who is coming across as always saying a hard and fast no to everything. We don't want to be those brick walls that don't allow anyone to come in and keep ourselves closed off from relationships. And so what happens as a result is many among us who struggle with boundaries end up feeling like our lives, our time, and our energy and our efforts are free for all. As if we live in a house on a property with no even fence differentiating between where our property ends and where the city property, the boulevard and the sidewalk begin. And so everyone walking by just sort of lets their dogs come in and pee on our grass, or, other kids in the neighborhood come in and kind of use the toys that are being left out on the lawn, or maybe a neighbor needs a hose at the last minute, so they just come and grab yours and then just throw it back onto your property without winding it up, without bringing it back the way that they found it, where we just kind of feel like, metaphorically, our space, our lives is a free-for-all. And so we don't know what to do. We feel taken for granted. We feel taken advantage of. We feel like we have to just let everyone use what they want, use us the way that they want, that we can't ever say no because we don't want to become that brick wall, closed off, seemingly selfish, difficult, or uptight person. But what if there was a space between? What if it didn't have to be that you are that your life and your time and energy is a free-for-all, that you have to just give to no end, whatever people want, whatever people ask, whatever the expectations are, you have to fulfill them. But it wasn't also that you have to close off everyone and everything and be rigid and protected. What if there was a middle ground space? And that is what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to teach you a skill for creating that for yourself so that you can have healthy boundaries in your life. And I talk not just about boundaries, I talk about healthy boundaries. What does that look like? That space where I can exist in my life while considering others and myself in the equation. What is a healthy boundary where I am included in the conversation around things that are being asked of me, where I am included in my own conversation around what's important to me, where my limits are, what I am available for, what I want, what I need, that I am also considering that and not just thinking I need to give and be available to no end. So that is what we are talking about today. I hope you get a lot out of this one. It's actually today, when I am recording this, we just had a masterclass in my membership community, the Shift Society, on how to have healthy boundaries for the holidays, as we're, at the time of them recording this, we're just moving into the holiday season and looking at boundary issues, looking at things that come up often with people who struggle with having boundaries with family, with expectations, with events, with obligations, and all of that stuff that tends to come with the holidays. And then that can create a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of upset, a lot of conflict when we are not clear on where our boundaries are or even how to set those healthy boundaries. So I'm hoping that some of what we talk about today helps you in the upcoming holiday season and in any circumstance or situation where you struggle with being on one end of the boundary spectrum because you fear going on the other end, or maybe you are on the other end. You are in a place where you are closed off and shut down and guarded because you got sick of feeling taken advantage of or taken for granted, or people just taking whatever they want, or you feeling like you needed to give whatever they asked. So now you're in that self-preservation mode, but also feel lonely and isolated and cut off and don't like that either. So I'm going to teach you the beautiful life-giving skill, energy, sanity saving skill of the yes and. Stay tuned. I think you're going to get a lot of help out of this one. If you're new here, welcome to our incredible little corner on the internet. Take a second, introduce yourself in the comment section below. If you're back again, it is always good to have you. If you haven't already, make sure that you get on the wait list for the Shift Society. The button for that is right down there. And what I talked about, my membership community, this is where we're taking this work deeper. We are working together within community and support and help and feedback to create those big shifts for your life. You can get information about that down there. But either way, my name is Kristina, and I am a registered therapist, coach, and creator of my membership community, the Shift Society. And I help heart-centered humans break through the crap that is holding them back so that they can like themselves and their lives more every day. And when we have healthy, clear, firm, and kind boundaries in our lives, it does help us to like ourselves and our lives more every day, because we don't feel trapped, we don't feel overwhelmed, we don't feel stuck under guilt or obligation, we don't feel stressed in our relationships, because a boundary is essentially the space or the line in which I end and you begin. So it is that space between us and others, and being able to consider ourselves and consider others. Boundaries are not about saying, that doesn't work for me, that's not okay with me, I can't do that, I'm not willing to. It's not about creating isolation by only considering how something impacts us. But it's often less like that for many among us here. For many among us here, it's more about thinking to ourselves, is it okay for me to say no? Is it okay for me to consider myself in the equation? It is okay for me to respect my own wants, needs, limits, and energy. That tends to be more what many among us here struggle with. So let's look at this strategy around the yes and. So as I talked about, boundaries don't have to be an all or nothing. Boundaries don't have to be that if someone asks something of us, we have to give them everything. If someone has an expectation of us, we have to completely fulfill it. If someone wants us to do something, that we have to comply without reservation. Boundaries can come with some caveats, with some side notes, with some parameters. And this strategy that I'm going to teach you is really as simple as creating space in your boundaries for the yes and. So what this looks like is someone asking you, can I borrow the hose from your front yard? And you're allowed to say yes, right? Going back to our hose, if you actually have some boundaries in there and somebody does ask you, they know that it's yours, they know it's not a free-for-all, and someone asks you, can I use your hose? You're allowed to say yes. And if you could coil it up in the way that I've coiled it when you return it, I would really appreciate it. So that's an example of a yes and. You're allowed to say yes, and you're allowed to have some caveats or some parameters around that yes. So then another example is something that can come up around the holidays. So whatever you celebrate in this time of year, often there is some sort of family gathering, group gathering at someone's house. So let's say one of your family members says, hey, you have the bigger home, can we have Christmas dinner or our Hanukkah celebration or whatever that is that you celebrate at this time of year, can we have that at your place? You're allowed to say yes and. Yes, I'm happy to host, and I'm going to ask that everyone brings either a salad or an appetizer, or everyone brings a side and everyone brings everything that goes around the main thing. If it's turkey, if it's ham, if it's lamb, whatever it is, that you say, I will do this, and I'm going to ask that everybody else provide this. If it comes to family coming into town and wanting to stay with you, or, you wanting family to stay with you, even if you want them there, you're allowed to say the yes and. You're allowed to say, hey, I'd love for you to come and stay with us over the holidays. If you could come sometime after this date, that would be great. I am working until that date, or I have a lot of commitments until then. So if you come after this date, that would be great. You're also allowed to have some parameters around how long. You're allowed to say, we'd love to have you come for 3 days over the holidays. As my great-grandfather used to say, fish and relatives start to smell after 3 days. So keep that in mind when you are committing. But whatever that is for you, if you want people to come and stay, or if people are expecting to come and stay, you're allowed to fulfill that expectation. You're also allowed to have some parameters around that expectation. Now, let's say also that people are coming to stay with you, or people, want to be around your home. Perhaps you have the bigger home, perhaps you have more space, perhaps people are just sort of used to being in your space, or you've been used to providing your space. But you're also now working from home, and you have work that you need to be doing over the holidays. You don't have all this time off. You're also allowed to say, yes, would love to have you come and stay. If you could go out, find something to do, find some activities, I can even offer some suggestions on these days between this time and this time, because I need to work and I need the quiet and I need the space in my home to be able to do that. What is that in your life that you need to start being able to say some yes ands? Interestingly enough, someone in the Shift Society recently posted that her partner's family, they had some more extreme weather in their neighborhood. And I believe, if I remember this correctly, I might be getting some of the details wrong, but the gist of it is still there, that their power was out. And so, they invited, or I think even her partner wanted to invite all these family members to come and stay with them so that they could make hot food, so that they could, put the heat on in their house. Nothing had gotten too extreme yet, but he wanted them to be a little bit more comfortable during this time, and fair enough. She also had a lot on her plate. She had kids, she had commitments, she had planning, she had work, she had all these things that she was doing, wasn't expecting to have a house full of company for, even a couple days, if that's all that it was. Wasn't expecting that, was finding the idea of that very overwhelming. And so she said to her partner, yes, happy to have them here, and would like to ask them if everyone could clean up after themselves, right? If everyone, yes, they're more than welcome to come, but I would like both of us to be on the same page with this and ask them to clean up after themselves, because I've got a lot going on, wasn't expecting the guests, don't have the capacity. Even if she didn't have a lot going on, it's also reasonable to say that if I'm opening up my home to all of these people, I'm allowed to have some requests. I'm allowed to have some requests that people clean up after themselves, that people chip in for groceries, that people help make the meals, whatever that is. You're allowed to have some parameters around that, some requests around that. It's really paying attention for yourself. What is it that's stressing you out about going into the holiday season? Is it around you feeling overwhelmed, feeling like you've got too much that you have to take on, there's too many expectations coming your way, that there's too much you're trying to do? Are you taking it all on instead of diversifying? Instead of asking for support? Instead of diffusing some of that responsibility that you have taken on, or maybe that even others are expecting you to take on, are you willing to create some space for the yes and? Are you willing to share in some of that responsibility? Are you willing to not meet all of those expectations? Are you willing to change some of those expectations? So what is that? I want to hear in the comments section below, and I can't wait to hear these. What is a yes and that you are going to implement over the next couple weeks? What's something that you are stressed or anxious or overwhelmed about because it feels like too much, that you can diffuse that overwhelm by creating the yes and? What does that look like? Specifically, what are you going to commit to doing to diffuse some of that stress and anxiety and that stress by sharing in the responsibility, by creating limits, by allowing yourself to say yes with some parameters around it? If saying no is something that you struggle with because you don't want to come across as rude or abrupt, aggressive, or unkind, I have a free guide for you. It's called 25 Ways to Say No. It is in that description below. It's free, and it's going to give you 25 clear but kind ways to say no that's really going to get you on your feet if that is something that you struggle with. Practicing the yes and, getting the 25 ways to say no, telling us in the comment section below what that yes and is going to be. What's your commitment here? So good to have you. Take good care of yourselves. Take good care of those around you, which also includes taking good care of yourself in that mix. See you soon.